All right.
It is 6:33, and I will call us to order, and I will begin with a roll call. John Christ, myself, I am present. Sue?
Here.
Phil?
Present.
Neil?
Present.
Mike?
Here.
Matt?
Present.
And Michael Bouchard is either excused or late this evening. And alternates, Zach is not present. Brad?
Yo.
And Molly?
Here.
And Jason.
Key.
Okay, and so with one member down, I guess I will seat our next alternate, which would be Brad for the evening as a voting member. And so up next, review of minutes from January 16th, 2025. And as always, thank you for the very thorough minutes.
Yeah, they were.
Oh my.
Really great.
Wow.
And thanks to Avery as well.
And thank you, Avery, as well, yeah.
for help with these.
The only thing under the engineering discussion on page 9, we should probably put Norma Jean's last name in there. Morrison. Just because we had everyone else's.
Oh my Lord.
Thank you, Sue, for bringing it to page
We've had some
9.
long meetings lately. I've had a few people comment that they watched
read them.
videos.
I usually do. I skimmed them.
All 4 hours or whatever it was.
Oh.
Hasn't it been all year?
It's not always that long.
No? I guess we had one meeting that was quite short.
Did we go to like, wasn't it 10:30 one night?
Yes.
We had a,
Yeah,
when
we
were
won that one
talking
till like 10:30.
To, what the overlay,
Yeah,
Sorry, Neil.
I think it was at least 10:30.
it was.
Oh.
I think,
That was
yeah.
almost 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
So that's 4 hours.
I was remote that day. That was
Really
fun.
nice job on the minutes.
Yes, I
Thank
agree.
you. Thank you, and I will let Avery know as well.
Not NB.
Which Wi-Fi?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion? That's a motion with the one amendment or change noted by Sue, I guess, yeah?
Yes.
Further discussion?
I would like to thank Joseph for taking my convoluted attorney example. Really, what made sense in my mind, but when I was verbally executing it, did not really come together. Thank you for bringing that together.
He's good at that. He does that a lot.
And then
That
it
is
should
really
reflect the intent of the conversation.
Thank you. Who's babbling fool?
All right. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved with that one minor change. Are there any public comments not related to business on the agenda this evening?
Hi, Claire McCann, Plymouth, New Hampshire. I would just like to state my extreme disappointment that the members of the board did not vote to put the Tenny Mountain PUD to the voters this March. I feel like it was a real 180 from a lot of seemingly consensus work that was done, as referenced with some of those 10:30 p.m. meetings that I have sat through as well. I think that a lot of the fears that were brought, particularly by the letter referenced in the minutes, were fears that would have been alleviated by having this PUD. And the fact that maybe there was some misunderstanding about the PUD does not mean the document itself was faulted. So I really encourage the board to take this matter up as soon as possible. I think it is necessary moving forward with Plymouth because development will be happening on Tenny Mountain, and I think the question is, do we want the town to have a voice in it? And if that's yes, vote for the PUD. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for your diligence, like
Yes.
staying till like 30, 11 o'clock at night. All right. With that, we'll move on to communications received by the board. And we have 2 letters for reappointment. And before we get to those, are there any other articles, items of communication?
One other message passed along by some planning board members, which we can talk about if we'd like to at some point, pertaining to zoning, possible zoning techniques, which, yeah, happy to advise on that.
Okay.
Board, or we can.
well, if possible zoning could be talked about a bit later, perhaps. So with that, we can move on to the appointments, and perhaps as vice chair, we can start with Sue. And Sue has a letter here. Would you like me to read your letter, Sue, or do you like to read your letter?
You can read it.
Okay. So dear Mr. Whedon and select board members, I have been sitting as a full member to the planning board for the last 3 years, with the last year as vice chair, and my term for this position will expire on April 1st, 2025. With housing and industry being in the forefront of the planning process for Plymouth, I would like to remain on the planning board for another term to continue this important work to help in the progress of the town. I respectfully request my continued participation as a planning board member for the next 3 years. Thank you for the board's consideration. Sincerely, Susan Wood. And just as a reminder to everyone, so this is, the planning board has been asked by the select board to give kind of an advisory opinion on what we think would be a good path forward with nominations or recommendations for appointments or reappointments. And so this is our chance to offer our input to the select board.
I make a recommendation that we let the select board know that we would like Sue to come back for another term.
Is that a movement or a
Motion. I
recommendation?
guess just a recommendation. It's not
okay.
really a motion.
Or a motion to recommend, maybe?
I don't know, should it be a motion?
Yeah.
Yes. I make that as a motion.
Okay.
I second that motion.
I think Brad may have had a second in there.
Oh, I believe he did. Yeah.
Brad's active tonight.
Right, he was active.
Is there any further discussion?
Sue, when did you first join?
It was 3.5 years ago. I came in as an alternate.
21? 21?
I
I
think
think it was 21.
And unfortunately, someone passed away that was on the board.
Oh, no, okay.
So they put me into that position at
I
that
see.
time.
Okay.
I nominated you and Mike on the select board.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
I just want to say it's been a pleasure to serve alongside you, and I think I always appreciate your bringing a breadth of opinions, sometimes different than my own, but always very thoughtful and measured, and I appreciated your input.
Thank you.
I concur. I think you bring a lot of thoughtfulness to discussions and represent, represent a share of the public interest that should be represented on the board. So I would support this.
Thank you.
I think your outreach has been above and beyond of a lot of required duties. I support that.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? All right, with that, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so the motion passes, and we recommend to the select board that Sue be reappointed to the planning board. And next, we also have a letter from Mike Ahern, which I have right here. Would you like to read your letter, or would you like me to read your letter?
We started with Sue having you read it. You can read mine.
To Plymouth Select Board regarding a new term. I am writing to respectfully ask the Select Board to appoint me to another term on the Planning Board. As a housing landlord who provides affordable rents to residents, small business owner, and longtime resident of Plymouth, helping to guide our small town in the planning process is a top priority of mine. Attending the state housing courses 2 years ago and again signing up for another batch of online and in-person sessions this year will allow me to bring necessary knowledge back to my fellow board members. Growing up in Claremont, New Hampshire allowed me to take notice of the devastation planning and profiteering developers can bring to a once vibrant, safe community. Seeing Plymouth enact the changes necessary to see housing prices that more people can afford is my goal, while protecting the aspects of Plymouth that brought us all here to begin with and why we stay. Mike Ahern.
Mike, when did you start?
About the same time that Sue did, 2021.
Were you on the board before that at any time?
Yes.
You were, okay.
Probably, I think, I got done 2020,
When you went on the select board?
when I went on to the select board to fill a term for, So the select board, the 5 members voted to bring me on board. I was very grateful and finished up that year, then ran for a 1-year position, then ran for a 3-year position, and then decided to give other people a chance in town to run for select board. And decided to come back to the planning board during COVID, and served as chairman of the board for a number of years and vice chair for a few years before that.
Wait, so you were on the planning board first and then select board and then
Yes, I
planning board?
got onto the select board during the time when Lowe's and Home Depot were both vying to come to Plymouth, and the meetings were, I think one of them lasted till 1:15 or 1:30 one night. So I got a good taste of that.
I would actually like to say something about this nomination, and I actually wrote a letter. So to the members of the Plymouth Planning Board and our community, I recommend Mike Aher not be reappointed to the Planning Board. This is not a position I take lightly. Mike has devoted countless hours over the years to serving Plymouth, and I applaud and admire his efforts to protect and promote our community. We do not always agree on which policies and decisions are most apt to realize our goals, and yet I do welcome the breadth of viewpoints that shape our discussions. It is his repeated disregard for the ethical, legal, and procedural foundations of responsible public service that have led me to take this position. He has repeatedly used exclusionary rhetoric, for example, linking low-income residents to crime and drug use. This rhetoric is especially problematic when considering housing policy, which is governed by FHA laws, where the implication would be the purposeful exclusion of members of an entire class of Americans from becoming members of our community. Just this past year, the board received a long and impassioned letter read to us at a public meeting after an incident in which he politicized a personal family tragedy to shut down a zoning amendment, the stated intent being to prevent those people, so-called, from coming to Plymouth. He has demonstrated a disregard for open meeting practices as enshrined in New Hampshire's Right to Know law, RSA 91A. After years of public service on the planning and select boards, and having previously transgressed this law, one would imagine he would be abundantly familiar with it. The most flagrant example of the circumvention of this law in the time that we have served together occurred in January of 2023. After violating the law by circulating a petition letter to all members of the Housing Steering Committee, a subcommittee of this board, he was instructed that his actions were unlawful, which was confirmed through his communication with the staff of New Hampshire OPD, the Office of Planning Development. Nevertheless, he distributed and read the illegally obtained and signed letter at the next planning board meeting with the intent of obstructing further discussion of all our proposed zoning amendments. While he made some minor changes to the letter, this in no way changed the unlawful process of an inclusion of quorum of committee members. Further, in presenting the letter to the public, he misleadingly claimed to have cut the communication short because he had already received adequate feedback, not because he had been called out by multiple parties for violating the law. He continued to misrepresent his stated intentions and the timeline of events throughout the meeting. This is just one instance reflecting his tendency to grandstand and especially to treat accepted procedures, bylaws, and RSAs as obstacles to circumvent or overcome, rather than the necessary guardrails to ensure open discussion, transparency in the deliberative process, and the ability of all to have equal opportunity to have their voices heard. It is often difficult to know if he is speaking forthrightly or if he is misrepresenting his beliefs for an ulterior motive, thus misleading members of the board, staff, and public. Laws and procedures, as they apply to the board's activities, are not inconveniences to bend to one's ends, but ways of facilitating effective governance. On numerous occasions during his current appointment to the board, Mike has spoken in a demeaning manner to members of the town staff, as well as other board members and consultants. This insulting and bullying rhetoric has no place on the board. While I could cite specific examples, I prefer not to normalize this type of rhetoric. Several of his actions also have the potential to create an uncertain climate for economic development in the town of Plymouth. He has spoken of some projects with prejudice, declaring them dead in one instance, or otherwise indicate that he may be prejudging their outcome prior to deliberations. Projects deserve a full and fair hearing and should be approved or disapproved on the basis of findings of fact and the town's zoning ordinance. Acting otherwise could easily give developers the impression that Plymouth is not a dependable and predictable environment in which to do business. I conclude by describing an occurrence this past week. I was CC'd on an email from Mike to Joseph Perez, our planner. He asked Joseph to distribute to the board for discussion at this meeting material pertaining to what could be a potential 2026 zoning amendment. Why does this action trouble me? The planning board agenda is set by the board chair, as Mike knows. He knowingly attempted to circumvent procedure by asking a staff member to distribute materials and alter the agenda. This board does not customarily discuss amendments for the following year prior to town meeting. He proposes the board discuss zoning changes that would overwrite a currently proposed amendment, clouding the public's understanding of the amendment and undermining its chances for fair consideration at town meeting. Town meeting is an opportunity for residents to determine the fate of proposed amendments without planning board interference. Mike's intent is clear, I quote, "It's important for folks who will be voting in March. This will have an impact on how they vote," end quote. It's not the board's role to sway voters at this point, but rather to inform voters and clarify the meaning of the proposed amendments. Finally, he misrepresents the process, he writes, and I quote, "This is important and has been brushed aside for way too long, as I have brought it up at our meetings over the past 6 months," end quote. Reforming our agricultural zone has been on the agenda for a long time, minimally since the public engagement a decade ago that informed our master plan of 2018. In that time, he has not once responded to community concerns by proposing changes to our zoning ordinance. In the past 6 months, he cites in his email, he has repeatedly claimed that the current zoning works and should not be altered. Only when it became apparent that an amendment would be put to a vote did he change his rhetoric and insinuate otherwise. To this day, he has yet to put forward any plan. The material he asked Joseph to forward to the board consists entirely of Joseph's own outline of broadly defined approaches to begin to explore. His characterization of the process is a lie, and his intent is to obstruct. For all these reasons, I recommend Mike Ahern not be reappointed to the planning board. And I'm not done. Addendum, written today. On Tuesday, February 4th, 2025, Mike Ahern contacted board member Phil Lamoureux about a matter cited above concerning 2026 zoning amendments, a conversation that already included himself, myself, and Sue, vice chair of this board. Mike, by forwarding that message string to Phil and involving him in the conversation, created a quorum of the planning board and thereby convened an unnoticed meeting of said board in violation of RSA 91A, cited earlier. His continued unlawful conduct in this board should not be tolerated, and at a minimum, he should not be reappointed. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond?
If you'd like.
So, a lot of points there, John. The message that I sent to you and Sue as the chair and the vice chair recently was in reference to talking about size, scope, and the type of uses that could be an alternative to what is being voted on in March. When I got the response, and I said, it's important for people to hear this information, I then sent it without CCing you folks, and to be clear, it was not about an item on the agenda to talk about it. It was to talk about scheduling an agenda item that would be for tonight's meeting. Obviously, we can't talk about an agenda tonight. It would be before the meeting. You let me know that that was not your interest to talk about that agenda item, not talking about the agenda item. And then I CC'd Phil, who was the third representative on the board, who was the recording secretary, not CCing you and yourself and Sue, because I am aware of the 3-person minimum. I did talk to, after I did send that to Phil, and Phil sent me back, I didn't return that to him. I don't know how you found out about it before the meeting started today. Might have been that Phil let you know, which then, again,
So I let Joseph know and I let John know, because my understanding of RSA 91A is that an email chain accumulates members. It doesn't matter if you copied me, because
they didn't see it.
it doesn't matter.
Okay.
The fact that you included me created a quorum. It's now my responsibility to report that's a violation of 91A, because you had other members
So I
The
did,
effect of of electronic communications is cumulative. If you add one more person that creates a quorum, that whole chain now becomes subject to right to know, which is why I suggested it needs to be part of the minutes for the next meeting.
which is fine. So I actually applaud getting that information out to the board, because one thing that I'm interested in is the more that the information that we see, that the public sees, and the sooner the better. I did contact Scott, our town manager, and let him know about that. His thinking was it was two different strings. And I said, and he says, I don't see a problem with that. But I said, I would like you to send it along to town council just to be sure that nothing was done, because my intent was not to. And he said that the town council is in some sort of mediation, but that he would bring it to his attention, and I said, thank you. And so I'm going by, tonight, what our town manager, that he doesn't think that it should be a problem if it's two different strings.
Well,
Could be that you're right. I would,
To clarify, Mike, we went through all this last year, and we went through this law very closely last year when you violated it last year. And we had a discussion of the fact that whether it's one string or individual ones, if you contact multiple board members about the same issue, that is a violation. And we talked about this last year very
So,
clearly. And you've been through this before.
New Hampshire Municipal Association guidance on this, it says, are there sequential communications involving in the aggregate a quorum of the body? If there is, then it's a violation.
so I see it, again, town manager's interpretation of it, but I see it as talking about the agenda that we would be coming to tonight. I don't see it as talking about an application. I don't see us as talking about a specific item that we would be maneuvering or changing, editing, or anything like that. It was just to bring an item up for agenda so that more people, more information would come to the light of day.
Just to clarify, so you said in your messages, you asked Joseph to forward this information to the full board so we could not discuss whether it be on the agenda, but discuss it at the upcoming work session. Why? Because it would change the way people vote. That's not asking it to
would
be on,
give-
that's not asking whether it can be on an agenda item for another meeting. That's saying we're gonna have a full discussion about this, and you are gonna ask Joseph, without getting it on the agenda first, to put an agenda item on the agenda, basically. And that's not how it works. And in doing so, you've also violated the law. Something, either you weren't paying attention, or you knowingly did it, I don't know. But we've been through this before. This is
Yeah.
not like new.
And when we discussed that last year, the year before, we also did discuss, when you were chairing the subcommittee on housing, that you were basically running a meeting off the public view. And that was, I forget what that software was. We were all editing information, the mission statement, all that. So it's not,
And that
we're
was
not all, we're
that was
all,
all declared fully legit by town council.
it was?
It was. Joseph, can you clarify that?
If you're bringing the documents back into a meeting, which is why I suggested we
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Phil. We're all volunteers here. We're all trying to do our best for the town. Many people have gotten up and spoke in appreciation for how I bring different perspectives to the planning board in the manner that I do it, which is extremely respectful. To this board, I have always tried in my life to be respectful of this board and any staff members. I've tried to be respectful at all times of any applicants. And I can see why you might not want me on the board, John, but I very much enjoy being on this board. I very much enjoy bringing a perspective from my years of experience on this planning board. There has been a lot of changes, and I'm glad I've been on this board to provide a different voice. But I've always paid you every chance that I can, multiple compliments. And I've always said how the amount of time that you put on this board and how you run the meetings. At the end of the meetings, I've complimented you many times. So,
Jason, one moment. I truly appreciate, for example, the perspectives that Sue, Matt bring to this board, and we often disagree, and I believe they are very respectful and honest and forthright in their statements.
and I believe I've been
And-
always honest.
Cite one example. I didn't want to cite what you've said about others. And this is not something that happened at a public meeting, but something that happened right after a public meeting. I can recall that you stuck around after a meeting and you referred to me as a puppet, being manipulated by the head of planning, and not having my own voice and being a failure as a leader. And you said it would be really great if the two of us could strike some kind of deal on the housing issue, and then we could both be heroes for the community. And that happened after a housing committee meeting?
Puppet doesn't seem like terminology that I would use. I
Interesting.
don't remember having that conversation.
Yeah, it was you and one other individual who had that conversation. And I think Joseph may have been in and out of the room. I can't quite remember the exact timeline. But yes, that happened. And you suggested that maybe me, like as a puppet here, being manipulated by our Department of Planning, that if we worked together, we could perhaps strike some kind of deal and be heroes. And heroes.
Oh,
the
yeah,
word-
I remember probably saying something like that.
Yeah.
That there was a lot of things that we could find. I always look for common interest in commonalities. And I always think that there's a ton of overlap with everybody. And I feel that despite what you said tonight, I still think there's areas where we can agree upon and make some really nice changes to housing, which we ended up doing and found that we voted the same way on much of the housing that went through 2 years ago or last year.
I totally agree, and that doesn't change the fact that you came to me after a meeting bullying me.
I think we need to move forward from that.
Go ahead.
I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, absolutely, go ahead.
I guess my question, Mike, I understand you do bring a nice perspective
Thank
to the
you,
meetings.
Jason.
I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. You and I generally disagree on those perspectives, but I respect hearing those things. On the other side, I am a nut and a stickler for due process and accordance, and so I guess I just wanted clarification. As the letter says here about your communication with Joseph, trying to add something to the agenda.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead. Do you want to ask the question or?
My as a standard, yes, the chair does set the agenda. And so if you are communicating outside the chair in order to add something to the agenda, I have questions of motive on that one. So if you can address that, that would be one of my bigger concerns, because, we are a body that follows procedures for the town and should be doing those things.
Yeah. So, and as a past chair, I totally agree. Procedures are extremely important. So, I don't know how many meetings, probably 4 meetings over a period of 6 months, I kept saying when John and Phil said, you haven't added anything, there's nothing that you want to change about the ag zone. And I said, well, there is. And I said, I think on at least 4 occasions, I said, we really should be looking at the size and the scope of the operation. And I didn't know where that should go or how it should work. So I emailed Joseph and I said, Joseph, what could we do with the size and the scope? Because it seems like this should be a middle of the road for the residents of Plymouth to have as an alternative to what they have in front of them to vote.
But doing that at this point in the process is not reflective of the scope what the board has put forth.
Right. So I asked Joseph, and I said, Joseph, how soon could this be voted on? Could it be, say, voted on in March? or could it be voted on that soon? Because my understanding is, if something is voted upon at a first hearing, and we say over a certain size excavation, over a certain size building, would kick that automatically to a special exception. Smaller businesses, office, repair shop, wouldn't get tied in with that. And I said, Joseph, how soon could we, and I believe Joseph said, I think he said that it could be voted on very soon, within possibly even March, which could then tie up until the next March for town to vote on. And it already kicks in as if it's,
But
That's actually factually incorrect. It's 120 days.
120 days before town meeting?
I believe it's 120 days before.
Do you know,
town meeting.
Joseph?
Yeah, so there's actually two separate questions in that question, and yes, there is a provision that says 120 days prior to a town meeting, if a first public hearing has been noticed on a proposed zoning amendment, and that would justify the town not issuing a particular building permit, the town may refrain from issuing a building permit until that is resolved. So that particular 120-day provision is, I think, what is sometimes referred to as how a zoning amendment that has already been the subject of a public hearing and will be voted on at the upcoming town meeting within 120 days may be somewhat applied to upcoming projects. There's no specific legal timeline on when you can have a public hearing per se, but the point at which that public hearing causes that other provision to kick in is 120. So it's kind of a two-sided.
Just to clarify intent then. So your intent is to have the planning board move something forward.
Yes.
So just in case the will of the people is heard and it goes a particular way, we can override that. Is that your intent?
Not to override anything, John.
That's what it sounds like.
No.
I'm confused about this 120-day
Yeah, I am
question.
too.
So the fact that we have amendments to the zoning going to town meeting, right?
Right now.
Right now, if we receive applications that could interact with the potentiality of those changes happening, we can postpone decisions until after the voter decision
The
is made.
town is able to deny a building permit if it would be, if, let's say, somebody came in with a request for a building permit for a business in the ag zone. Since there's a question about
If that's going to be permitted.
those are going to be permitted in the future, the
Yeah.
town is in its authority to deny that building permit until
we
at
know
least
the
until
answer.
town meeting.
Until we know the answer. Okay.
But it doesn't, that only applies to building permits. That would
Okay.
not prevent someone from bringing us a site plan for a business that would not be allowed. So, I mean, it's specific to building permits. So
Okay.
we could adopt something that might be, if we were to consider a zoning amendment now for the 2026 town meeting.
Yeah.
It really wouldn't have any effect, and I think it would just, honestly, I do question the intent, and I think the intent may be to confuse the issue around the petition zoning amendment that has
So-
already been put in front of voters.
So I don't
Essentially
want to,
obstruct its implementation.
Yes.
so I don't want to confuse anything. I just want
Obstruct
to,
its implementation.
So if you don't want to confuse anything, there's no point in bringing it up now. Like,
So-
it's better to wait until after
so
town meeting.
possibly, but everybody has said, and from my understanding is, they're worried about a large hotel. And yes, what's in front of us would prevent a large hotel in the ag zone. But I'm thinking there's got to be a middle of the road where we all can be happy with what we've put together,
And
rather than.
that's not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is your appointment, and we're not talking about how we want to zone. That's not the discussion right now. What the people want in zoning, that's not our discussion. Our discussion is your abuse of the process.
So I think I would not characterize it as abuse. I think I have given a different perspective. I enjoy being on this board. I've spent a good part of my life in this community, like Neil has, but not as obviously as long as Neil. but this town is very special to me. Anybody that would think otherwise,
we
the
don't-
fact, the fact,
We don't doubt the sincerity of
in the,
liking
and-
the town.
And I am not trying to do anything on purpose to thwart any of the RSAs or the intent of any rules. Again, the town manager said, looks good to me, and I said, I want at least town council looking at this. My intent was to talk about an agenda item, to get it on, so that people know that we're trying to come up with other alternatives, if that helps. And that's the best way to make a decision on the ongoing ag zone amendment.
So Mike, when you circulated the petition last year,
Yes.
did you send out one email to everyone, or did you contact people individually? Because I got contacted individually. And then you called New Hampshire OPD for clarification, and they said that is a violation.
They said, yeah, you're in some gray area, and they said what you need to do is to send out an email to clarify, and I did send out an email. I did everything that they told me to do, because I don't want to be in violation of anything, John. We're all volunteers here. No one is perfect. I am probably more vocal because I want the town to have a good understanding, because I've spent a lot of time on housing with the subcommittee. I've devoted a lot of time to this community, and I probably know it because I'm also a landlord. I see a lot of things, and I think that knowledge brought to the planning board is very valuable.
Mike, if I could say something, I think, to your credit, you do great work at trying to reach out to the community, share information, and build
Thanks, Phil.
consensus.
Thank you, Phil.
I think your efforts in doing that can cross the line of appropriateness or of engagement that requires disclosure. I have also seen it, I think in my head, I've got 3 instances. I forget what the middle one was, but the letter that, there was definitely a letter that was submitted by a quorum of planning board members that was obviously discussed outside of noticed planning board meetings.
It was a quorum of committee members. We're the subcommittee of this planning board.
But it was a
But yes,
subcommittee,
but, yeah.
no, but there was a letter that came to the planning board that had signatures of a quorum of planning board members that was not noticed as planning board business. The email I got today, I think is another violation. I think there's been another one in my recollection. I forget what the instance
So
was,
we'll
but
find out from town council.
my concern is that your intention of building consensus and helping people share can cross the line of what we can do as a board.
Even if it's not your intent to cross that line, you want to skirt it as closely as possible to bend the rules.
I don't want to bend the rules. And I apologize to this board and the public if I have bent any rules. That was not my intention. My intention is to be the best planning board member that I can be and to serve my community in the best way that I can. I love this community. No one is perfect, but I'm trying my best, and it is not to circumvent any rules. If I did, I take this opportunity right now to apologize for that. And going forward, I will do everything in my power to do everything 100% the right way.
I feel like I've heard this before.
Unfortunately, I have to corroborate the second paragraph of this letter referring to exclusionary rhetoric around people of a certain class coming into the community. That happened this past summer. And, it was a time that was probably very difficult because of a really horrifying personal family tragedy. But I did not find that to be an appropriate piece of rhetoric to bring into this board.
Let me give you some I'm glad you brought that up. There is information that when that accident happened, my daughter survived.
Very happy about that.
Yeah. And she very well might not have. But thank God. I was very close to my daughter for a very long time, and when that accident happened, I was told by the sergeant at New Hampton that I had to be very cognizant that there would be charges filed. And that I couldn't say what was going on. I had to be very careful, and I stayed to the letter of what the sergeant at New Hampton asked of all the parents and all the people involved. So I couldn't say that it was illegal activity, and it was not. I know that the select board member came and said it was about a class of people. It was absolutely not about a class of people at all. Never my intention about any class, believe me.
Okay.
I have an extremely diverse amount of friends. I also rent to a good number of people that have every diverse background you could imagine, including coming in with vouchers, with every imaginable aid that's needed. And I've done everything in my power. If you look at, I mean, I've got a tenant that just moved out after 34 years of living in my apartment. I have another tenant that moved in 1971. She's still there. I have another tenant that's been there 15 years now. So there is absolutely, don't worry, there is nothing involved with that class, believe me.
I hope so, because, I mean, I feel like it's really for the betterment of our town if we can.
It was illegal activity, Molly.
Well-
And that was my, and I apologized that I couldn't be more, but I also did not want to throw anybody who is local under the bus and make it, to throw salt in a wound, because they were sitting in a hospital still.
Right.
And I was very cognizant of that.
Excuse me.
You have in the past made statements to the effect that if we allow for affordable housing in this town, people with ankle bracelets and other such people will be moving into our town.
I did relay that I did hear that there is workforce housing, and I've said that there was, and that at the time, that's illegal, as far as I knew, to allow, and I also said that it's a certain.
Can you clarify that? Can you finish the
I don't
sentence?
think workforce housing, and again, it could be, but I don't think you're allowed, and again, I don't know where it is in the process of the courts. I don't know.
What's the intent
Allowed, hold on.
of saying that story?
Oh, you didn't think what's allowed. I'm sorry. I need you to finish this
If
sentence.
using terms like workforce housing is allowed?
Criminal activity,
Oh.
that's all. It's not about anything else other than criminal
Like, criminal activity
activity.
is allowed in workforce housing. Is that what you're saying?
These are specifics I don't think we need to delve.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to be
It's more about the
understood.
intent of making statements like this. Like, why would you tell a story like this if not to cloud our understanding of a class of people?
I have more experience with rentals than a lot of people. I've had very good experiences with a whole wide range. What mostly I've said is second homes are the best way to go because they bring in a great number of people that come here for vacations, skiing, and they don't cost the town a lot in tax money. I am very much in favor of doing everything possible that we can within whatever rules and regulations that we have to keep property taxes low.
And I do believe you love this town and are trying to.
Thank you, John.
So, John,
Appreciate it.
you've given us a letter. Is there anybody who would care to motion one way or another with a response to the select board? I'm not a big fan of the select board asking us for recommendations. So I'm going to move that we provide no recommendation on the letter from Mike. Not to say that I don't value your opinion on the board. This gets me, let's wrap this up and then I'll come back. I have something else I want to share on this topic.
Okay. So you have a motion not to make a recommendation?
Yeah. And it's more about the process, which I want to talk about more later.
Did you want to?
I do feel that Mike has a lot to offer to the board. He's got a lot of history. He's got a lot of knowledge of the rules. But I do find that there are a lot of times when there just seems to be a lot of dissension as soon as you get in, depending on what's on the agenda. And I think that just is not only you, but it's, you know, it's you. I feel like the two of you, even in those housing meetings, when I was part of that a few years ago, it was, if one would say black, the other would purposely say white, just because. So I feel like there still is a little bit of that going on. But I do also know that people in the public have also mentioned to me about some of these instances, because they've been brought at the meetings and people hear the meetings. And they've just questioned it. You know, what's that mean? And I refer them to the town hall. I refer them to Joseph, or they can contact the chair, because I have no answer for those questions. I honestly, I don't know where to go from here with this letter and all these instances. And I certainly, I like working with Mike. I respect his opinion, and having a different opinion about things oftentimes opens my mind up to other things. I can come in with an idea or a way I'm going to vote on something, and then just listening to everybody, it just restructures my way of thinking, just because it's not all about me, it's about the town. So you do offer a great deal of that, and, you know, I thank you for that, and you as well. So this is difficult.
I think Phil's motion is probably a wise move. Then, if there's not a really clear answer.
Which of course you cannot second, I think.
I can't. I'm just saying. I did say I was seconding it.
Yeah, and I know. Just clarifying for everyone else in case we forget, yeah.
Yep.
I do think it's a difficult thing for us to make this decision for anybody on behalf of the select board. You know, I think,
And that's where I was going to go.
I think it puts us in a really,
We're
bad
having a much
position.
more honest conversation about this than I thought we ever could, and I still don't like the process. I still don't.
I don't either.
This board should not be in this position. Either the select board should put their big boy pants on and make the decision, or they should hand it over to the voters, as the petition warrant article has been put forth.
Neil, how do you feel about this?
Well, yeah, it disturbs me that it seems that Mike repeatedly runs over the chair, and it makes it difficult to manage the hearing or the meeting. And, that's a violation of the rules of order, and it's repetitive. It's repetitive, and oftentimes our meetings kind of get steered away from the direction that they probably should go, because other people are not able to be recognized.
So in response to
Go ahead.
Neil's comment, I always address, before I speak, to the chair.
I don't agree.
Huh?
I don't agree.
Oh.
Phil, I'm just going to call you out. In theory, your motion should have been placed with Sue's vote also, if, you know, we're unhappy with the process.
And I wanted to deal with, so that's why, what I brought up, so my motion is specific to Mike's. I think based
yes,
on the
absolutely.
discussion, I would move that we not put a recommendation forward for Mike's letter. I'll stand behind the motion that to support Sue on that. But in general, big picture, I do not like this process. I don't like that we're being asked to provide feedback.
I know your stance on the
And
process, absolutely.
So the other thing that is relevant to this is that the select board has these requests for appointment. The terms are up on April 1st. I have requested that the select board not make these appointments until after town meeting, or so that if the public makes the decision to elect planning board members in the future, then my understanding is that appointed members, if they're not reappointed and no one's appointed to fill their seats, the appointed members would continue in those roles until the election the following year. The other thing that I think this board should consider is that if the town votes to elect planning board members, we should amend our rules of procedure to grant the authority to come up with a process for appointing alternates and appointing members. Most towns that do this appoint members, so you appoint members for interim vacancies. So
Yes.
let's say
Someone moves.
someone leaves town and there's 6 months till the next election, you can appoint an alternate. You can appoint someone to fill the interim vacancy until the election, and then at that next election, the remainder of that term would be up. So so basically in an election, every year, 2 seats are going to be up for a 3-year term, and then any vacancies that have come up along the way, there might be a seat for a 3-year or 2-year term. There might be a seat for a 1-year term.
And just to kind of bring us back here, so this is a hypothetical at this point.
It is.
And
It's a
at this
question that
point,
will be right.
The select board has also asked us for a recommendation. And our recommendation might be to wait, or we're not going to give a recommendation. But they did ask us for a recommendation.
And
And it might be just be that we don't have one.
And
And that
I've
can
made
be
a
a
motion not
recommendation.
to make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's up to them to make the decision.
So
Yes.
Is that correct?
It's up to them anyways.
Yeah, either way,
It
it's
is up to them anyway, I
But we've made
realize that.
Yeah, I mean, our
recommendations that
recommendations
we've
are
disregarded
non-binding.
in the past.
My question is, has the select board ever had a choice of people to appoint, or has it always been one person at a time? And in that case, it's never really a choice. They just have a question, I'd like to be appointed to the planning board. And do you ever say no? Like, I want to know if anybody's ever been denied
Yes,
in recent history?
16 years ago.
Okay.
Generally, when there are available positions on the board, the select board asks people to send a letter. And usually, we don't get that many letters. And we're fortunate to be able to fill the board.
I think
So
you'd have
we don't
better turnout.
usually- We don't usually turn people down.
Sure.
I think if, in a situation where seats are announced to the public and you have to file, I think you'd probably get better turnout if they knew it was if candidates knew that filing, there might be a race. Sometimes they might run unopposed, but
What do you mean by better turnout?
Well, we'll see how that goes. We don't, I mean,
So
this is
if-
all hypothetical.
I think you might have more people willing to put their name on the ballot.
Oh, not for voters.
If
for
it's
people.
elected,
Yeah, to be on
as
the board.
opposed to
So-
as opposed to requesting appointment.
Before we get too far down this hypothetical, so you're,
We should circle back.
yes.
And I haven't heard a second to my motion yet, so if
No.
it does, unless somebody else can make a motion.
I'll give it a second.
We have a motion and a second
Interesting.
to not make
I
a
was not
recommendation
expecting
to the
that,
select board.
I didn't want it, but somebody had to do it.
Is there any further discussion? Did you have a comment? Yeah, I thought you saw your,
After the vote.
after the vote,
I
okay.
was about the voting.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
Nay.
Abstentions?
Nay.
Wait a second.
I think
So that
that's-
was 3 ayes and 4 opposed.
Yeah.
4 nays.
So the motion to not make a recommendation fails. Do we want to have a second motion, or do we want to just leave it at a kind of failed state? Which we can do.
I'd make a motion to recommend, Mike. I don't, I'm actually gonna stop with that.
Okay.
Make a motion to recommend
Fair enough?
Mike.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, with that, all in favor of the motion to recommend Mike?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay?
Nay.
Okay, so Mike is recommended by a 4 to 3 vote.
Can I,
You may.
I would like, this didn't matter which way the vote went. I appreciate everybody's comments. I think it was a very good discussion. And done with that, Phil, the voting, if that does pass, who would be the first person up? It
So
would be 2026, as I understand it.
I'm not sure. I know Sue and Mike, you guys are both up for reappointment in April 2025 this year, and my understanding is that you could both continue to serve
That was 4.
under the RSA. I found I was reading.
Right, so,
So you would both be up. You would both have to run for. So your seats would be posted as 2-year vacancies, and then there would also be 3-year vacancies. So there would be 4 seats up for election in 2026.
how many?
There would be 4 seats up for election in 2026.
Okay,
Because
and-
every year it's 2 3-year terms, and then any vacancies that have been created in the previous year would also have to be filled. So
Those would be 2-year terms then.
there would be 2 seats for 3-year terms and 2 seats for 2-year terms
In
in
2026.
2026, if this goes forward.
I had heard, and don't quote me on this, but I talked to Amy, and I thought, she said, the longest serving on the board now, or the 2 longest serving, I'm not sure.
No, I mean, every year when, there was an email that went out with the appointments and terms. I think Joseph sent it to us last year. I found it in my messages. There is a defined term for who serves from what period of time. So.
Yeah, so, again, I believe you said 2 people would be a longer term, 2 people would be a shorter term.
So, I mean, in 2026, there would be 2 3-year terms up for filling and 2 2-year terms.
Which would be
And it
partial
doesn't
ter-
really
partial
matter.
terms.
What's that?
It would be partial terms to fill a vacancy, basically.
Well, it would be an elected seat, it would be an elected position to fill a 2-year seat.
Well, yeah.
Because those seats would go up for election in 2028.
So at this point, it sounds like there might be a little bit of uncertainty about how exactly the first year would work, or maybe there's not. But let's just see how that goes.
Well, I mean,
and
my understanding is that I think it was RSA like 574B or something like that, it said, appointed members can continue to serve if no one is appointed to fill them
Okay.
them after their term is up.
Okay.
And I think that would apply in this situation. And even if it didn't apply, my intention before I knew that was going to be to amend our rules of procedure, appoint Mike and Sue as alternates, and then appoint them to fill those seats.
Well,
for
at
the
this
rest
point,
of
this
the
is
year.
all hypothetical. And let's
Yeah.
just-
Right.
One more question, Phil. What did, if you don't mind, what did you ask of the select board? I sort of missed that.
So I believe the select board has been asked to consider these appointments prior to town meeting. And my request is for them to wait until after town meeting. Because
They would usually make them
after
before.
town meeting, they would not, so if they get appointed before town meeting, it would be for another 3-year term. And if it's after town meeting, they would have to run in a year in 2026.
In 2026.
They would be able to continue their term, their 1-year term next year, but then they'd have to run again.
Yeah, so you're in favor of
I
the
agree.
election process.
I believe the election process is better for everyone.
What about for all boards?
It is. I believe that, we have a good board, we have intelligent people, and my concern is that I'm not sure that the decisions we're making as a board are representative of the general public. And I think having us be elected as individuals will better represent the interests of the public.
Okay,
So
with
this is
that-
nothing personal against anyone.
I think that's, I think you've got it. It's very obvious in the stuff that we've been doing over the last year and just pounding the pavement.
Yeah.
It's very obvious it's not represented well.
Well,
And I-
yeah, and it's hard to know
It is.
until members are elected. I think it's better for everyone to know that, like, we were all elected, if we're sitting here as elected members, you're more empowered to know that, yeah, you should speak up, speak your voice. You were put here for a reason.
It would be a paid position then, too.
No,
$5 a
it's
year.
not.
I
don't think it is.
And with that, let's,
I don't think
we
it
have an
is.
agenda, and let's,
Moving right
let's
along.
move forward. Thank you all for the active discussion.
Can I say one more thing? Despite my criticism of the select board, they have a lot going on. I respect what they do. I don't think that appointing planning board members should be on there.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Are there any reports from committees? I know you guys have been active, although I guess you're at the end of your work at this point.
Budget?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, there was a hearing tonight at 5:15. I did miss it. It's with the select board. The select board had the hearing, so really it's in their hands, but I do. Joseph, were you at the meeting?
Yep, so the select board, and Neil can probably speak to this too, the select board did agree to put forward or move forward with all of the warrant articles and the budget as presented, so the budget being the same budget that was presented at the first budget hearing and the same that was initially recommended
No
by the select
changes.
board, with no changes.
No change, right.
So it is the same budget document, there were no changes made during the hearings.
And the warrant articles for the planning.
All
On the
warrant
ballot.
articles. Yep, all warrant articles were also certified by the select board. The ones on the ballot, the officers, that sort of thing, and also the ones for town meeting.
We had a quorum.
And thank you for your diligent work.
Well, really, Scott and Ann, they're on it. They do an outstanding job. And they work with all the department heads. Their communication with the department heads, it's very good. Really, we've come a long way. So my hat's off to them.
They're the best I've seen.
They really are great. The budget committee stepped into it, and I know there was a little bit of work, but really, it was all done.
Lucky us.
Our job easier.
Yeah.
And is very, very good.
Yep, and Scott has done it. The communication is great.
All right.
We're fortunate.
Nothing is going on in the winter with LRPC. There's often a little bit of a break in the
I
winter.
was mean to ask. You guys when was your last meeting?
There's a break in the winter, so our last meeting, I think, was, I'm gonna say November, I think?
Oh, wow.
And our next meeting is I think it's February again. What's that?
That was for you. Mark.
Thank you.
I joked.
Matt made a joke and I laughed. It was good. It was a good
That's the
joke.
last one I had to hear. All right, excellent. Well, thank you for no update, I guess.
Anybody else have anything? No? Okay, fair enough. All right, so new business, preliminary discussion of HOP Round 2. Before we quite get to that, speaking of housing, or two FYIs on housing, OPD, Office of Planning Development, is hosting a plan webinar, Planning Lunches at Noon, PLAN. Housing update which is a housing update on Thursday, February 20th.
Is that for the state housing? update?
That's the state, yes, state housing, State Office of Planning and Development is hosting this. They have these noon Thursday meetings, webinars, and they're hosting one this month on the 20th on housing. So an update on where we are, if
Are
anybody's
we
interested.
still waiting for the funding?
For the HOP?
It was authorized, but
I don't know, Joseph, do you have any updates on where we stand?
No, we did get the award, so it's all, the funding has been awarded to the town, and the town did sign the grant agreement after being authorized to do so. And then as the board requested, we did request a contract from Barrett Planning Group, and they did provide us with that, so.
And have we signed that on our end yet, or not
I
yet?
believe so. I will check
she
with
had the
Scott.
best, she had the best offer.
Was it 20,000, Joseph?
25 was the total award.
My understanding is that federal funding that has been committed is still planned to go out, but it gets muddy as to what's committed and what's
Yeah.
not. Right?
Yeah, that crossed my mind, that question.
Yeah.
Um,
Everywhere.
Also notice, before we get into a discussion, Housing Academy is underway again, and we have one member in attendance for our community this
Is it
round.
too late to join?
I will say that it is very highly enrolled,
Okay.
to the point that they're concerned about our face-to-face meetings
Okay.
not being possible for everyone to attend
Okay.
because of like limited space.
Will you report back to us, please?
If I go, yeah, I'm planning on going, but I did get an email that those, and I don't know if I'm the only one that got this email because I went 2 years ago. They'd like to get new faces in there. I let them know that I would really like to go because I think the interaction with the other folks from different communities is good to then bring that new information
Yep.
back to the board. So I've always, when I attend these sessions, I always do bring back new information.
Okay.
And so I hope I can.
The other thing while we're on this, May 11 is the Spring Planning and Zoning Conference, which is all online, but it's 8:45 to 3:30 online classes. That's, I used to attend when it was in person. It's a great resource for planning board.
Have they announced this year yet?
It's available at, oh no, sorry, this is Spring 2024, sorry.
'Cause I know last year they were actually talking about whether or not we wanted to return
Oh,
to
interesting.
face-to-face meetings
It's
or
not
not.
May 11th.
I recall that
No, it's not May
discussion. I
11th,
had not
sorry.
heard any
It was-
resolution.
It's May 11th.
Okay.
2024, which
It would be
is
nice to have a
sorry.
face-to-face
I missed
meeting
that.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
I-
surprised it's still the website.
I agree. It was historically, I believe, on a Saturday
Yeah.
morning, and
They used to do a spring and a fall, and they were always on the best days of the year, which was hard to be there.
yeah. But it is also his last few years. It's been on Zoom, and it still is.
It did
it's
take-
pretty good.
And they took a survey last year to see if we wanted to bring it back.
It's so
too.
much better
An
in person.
entire day on Zoom is rough.
If
Very
anybody
much.
would like, though, you can also watch them back on YouTube. That is last year's session. So all those sessions are recorded and available to watch, kind of at your leisure, if you wanted to.
It eliminates the whole like going to a conference and talking to people, and which is usually like half the conference.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of value in actually going, and if you have questions and,
Yeah.
and all of those other things, but
They're usually planners and engineers that have tables, so you can talk to consultants and people we might hire too. You know, it's nice that, oftentimes there are engineering consultants there that do planning work, like Barrett might be there, Resilient might be there, other. engineering.
Judy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was next on my list to say, of course, we as a whole board, so most of us know this, we have chosen Barrett Planning Group again to work with us, and I have a note that we are in process of drawing up a contract, and which we just addressed.
either we have the contract, and I do not recall if Scott has signed it yet or not, but Barrett has signed it, provided it to us. It's pretty standard format, so it's either signed or will be in very near future.
So, workload. There's going to be a good amount of engagement and outreach activities like there was the last hop, although in this time around, it's less focused on where should we be like rezoning and how, and the regulatory audit and and more about what is our vision, because we're drawing up a master plan, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes. But to understand the community's vision, and not just say, oh, what's the planning board's vision, but to really understand the community's vision, in the master planning process, there's a good amount of engagement and outreach again. And I think we're going to have to decide as a board how we want to move forward with that. And so we haven't gotten a kind of full work plan yet from Barrett Planning Group, and I believe they're working on it, but don't have it done quite yet. So hopefully at our March work session, in addition to talking about the zoning amendments that are up for a vote, we can also talk about whatever starts to take shape in terms of a work plan. Yeah?
I need a refresher on what the part 2 of the HOP grant is funding.
So we asked for several things.
Yeah.
The thing we got,
Yeah.
of the things we asked for,
Yeah.
was a housing chapter of our master plan.
Okay, thank you. So we need help writing that chapter.
Yes, and especially, we need help writing the chapter,
Yeah.
and they're going to need help doing some of the engagement work.
To write the chapter.
to write the chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, our last master plan was published in 2018, but I suspect that most of the work got done in 2017, and a lot of the legwork got done in 2016.
Yeah,
Like,
so we're at it right
It takes a
now.
while, like, we
And that's
should
next
all
on-
be thinking
That's
about.
next on my agenda as well.
Good. All right, thank you. All right, I don't want to preempt you there, sorry.
Can I just go back to those housing sessions where Mike said that he may not be able to go because he's been? Would it be wise to, if Molly's willing to do it, have her go? She's a new face and she can go to these and get whatever new information is coming about
So here's what I'll say.
presented.
I would encourage you to reach out to Sue Cagle,
Okay.
and find out if you can go. I do know, though, that they are trying to limit people at this point,
Okay.
because they are so heavily enrolled. It doesn't really matter for the virtual sessions as much,
Right.
but it
Well, I
just,
just wonder where she's willing to do it. He's been, she's a new face.
Has a better chance of being let in.
She may be able to get in
Can we send
there.
her in lieu of, no offense, like,
I mean, it doesn't solve the overcrowding problem.
No,
but
it doesn't.
It might,
Might get us
but it
in
might, but
there.
it might help, yeah. It couldn't hurt to try.
Yeah, I'll double check my calendar and ask, and if you're not allowed to go, then
Yeah,
I can go.
I would have no problem stepping down if someone from Plymouth wanted to take my
Okay.
place. I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay.
If you can't make it and there is room, I would like to go.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I have a
absolutely.
lot more time in the winter than I do other
Right.
parts of the year.
Right. Well, so I will double check my schedule. I might have a teaching conflict, and I can email you, let you know, or
Just have-
text you if you're
Just
number.
have your class watch a video, Molly. It's not that hard. Come on.
Shh, Jason. Some of them might be watching this meeting right now.
So just an FYI, it's the in-person sessions are Wednesday the 12th and Wednesday the 26th from 9 to 1.
Okay.
And it is
And where are they?
So next
Concord.
Wednesday.
Society Building in Concord. They're great meetings, they're very well run, the speakers are awesome. I get a lot out of those, especially the in-person
Forest Society, is that where they're?
in Concord. No, that's where the one that's coming up on the
12th.
12th?
12th and 26th,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know about the 27th, where it is.
They decided not to do it at the New Hampshire Housing Office this time because that's a little bit south of Manchester, which is even,
like Bedford, right?
which is south in the state. So Concord's a little bit more centralized. I guess in Bedford. Yeah. All right. Let's see.
We did get a message, I don't know, it might have to do with the storm. It sounds like some people online, there's some audio fluctuations.
Okay.
But if possible, if we can try to just do what we can
Go
with the
close to the
mics,
mic.
but it might also be an internet
So we'll
problem.
hopefully it won't affect the recording that gets like put on PBTV and all.
Shouldn't affect me.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Picard.
You're getting good audio in there? All right, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Good to know. All right. So I think we'll have to decide. We don't have to do it tonight, but at least, at the very least, start thinking about. And if you have any preliminary ideas tonight, like, do we want to try to convene a housing committee again, like a steering group? And I think it was incredibly beneficial last time.
Me too.
At the same time, like, I think we all started to get really kind of burned out by the end.
I'd say that, yeah.
It was a lot of work, though.
It
So I
was.
think about us taking on all that. And I'm like,
And,
geez, do we, like,
but this is an opportunity, if, we wanted us to have like one or two members here on there to work with members of the community to do that engagement work. That might be beneficial again, if anybody's kind of willing to jump into that. And I'm not sure I don't know if anybody has preliminary ideas, but I'm not sure we need to decide tonight. But certainly by March, we should have an idea of how we want to go on that.
I'm not sure. My only idea or my only thought on the topic is we did a lot of work, and I try to envision we did a lot of work as a committee, and I try to envision us as the board doing all that work. And I don't see us having the bandwidth necessarily to. So I think a committee might potentially be a good idea for some of it.
I mean, it's
to alleviate
I would
some
say
of it.
it's definitely a good idea. And the question is our capacity to do that. And if we have it, then I think it would absolutely be a good idea, yeah.
So when you say, so this is the committee that decides on when we're having like focus groups, for example, at the high school and organizing all of that?
And there's a lot of contacting and meeting with our planning group for planning and
It's about the outreach.
Okay,
and it takes, hours and hours of work off of the planning board
yeah,
as a full group.
yeah.
So there would be a subcommittee of the planning board, which would kind of still reach back to us and have members of the planning board, at least one on the group.
What are the quorum rules for that
Um,
thing?
They should follow the same rules as any other group.
So they have to be publicly noticed?
They're all
subcommittee
publicly
rules?
noticed and follow the same rules.
Okay.
And
have
if
to
we
have
don't want to have a
minutes.
total headache, because this came up at some point when you were appointed,
Mm-hmm.
we shouldn't have a quorum of the planning board also on this committee.
That's what, okay, so that was my question. Yeah, so there should really only be 3 planning board members
Tops.
on this subcommittee.
And it could be
Okay.
less,
The
but
last time I stepped down early because we had another planning board come on,
Okay.
remember? It was-
Thanks.
That would be Matt?
well, he was already a
agreed to
member of
it.
the committee and then he became a planning board member.
Oh, I see, okay,
I was,
okay,
yeah, I'm a member of the public first.
okay.
Then all of a sudden, every committee would also be a planning board meeting.
Right, exactly.
Where
that's-
minutes are now.
Right, exactly.
Anyhow.
So how do we select members of the public to be part of the subcommittee?
That's a good question, and there are a few ways of handling that. Last time, we went out and found people.
Okay,
And my own kind of first impression here is I would love to start with an open call to
I was
the
gonna
community
say,
to see who would
newspaper.
volunteer,
yeah,
and then, as needed, maybe kind of fill in.
yeah,
But I would love to have a kind of open call just to see who's really excited to be part of this that we may be missing out on as well.
yeah.
I'd be curious to know if we could get some of the, some involvements from people who work in some of the shelters in town. You know, they're familiar with some of the struggles of the unhoused and might have insights into how to best lighten their load.
And ultimately, the membership is approved by the planning board itself. As a subcommittee of the planning board selects a chair and then would approve as well the final membership when they formally create the committee. The board could also create some sort, like with the CIP committee, we created a little bit of like a purpose statement, which outlined specifically more, because that one was a longer term ongoing committee, kind of how the committee should function in terms of who should generally be on it, how many members, that kind of thing. That may or may not be necessary. The board doesn't have to come up with those, but the board should probably at very least select a chair and decide on the membership.
And I've got to say, the members of the committee who were on there last time, like, we all like worked our butts off.
Yeah, that was a lot.
And I was
It
really
was
like,
good,
it
though.
was really impressive to like see everybody get together and do all that work.
And I don't think the master plan part of it won't be every week for 18 months.
And it wasn't quite every week, but
We
almost.
changed it after like a few months, like this is not gonna be sustainable.
It fluctuated a little bit. We said, oh, we have a light couple of months and a heavier couple of months, but it was a lot. Yeah.
The holidays were tricky.
And I don't think there's as many components to this. I think it'll be.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we have some input already from the previous engagement we've done, which wasn't really master plan focused in terms of a broader vision, but I mean, some of that's in there, so we can build on what we already have.
Yeah, and we're working with the planner that has a relationship with
Yeah.
us in the town.
All right.
Good.
So if any of you are interested in being part of a committee and putting that extra work in, be ready to speak up in March or earlier, perhaps, at our next business meeting even. It's going to be a busy meeting potentially, but you can always just make your voice heard and just say, hey, I'm interested. All right. Which, as Phil noted, does bring us to a general master planning discussion. So our last master plan was adopted in 2018, which, it's a big process, which means you don't start in 2018 to come up with a 2018 master plan. And typically, sort of our last one was in 2018, the kind of best practice is usually considered 10 years for a master plan life cycle. And so that would put us at 2028. It's 2025 now. And so it is time to start thinking about this. And the housing master plan chapter can be a good point of kind of launch to start thinking about this process and how that'll look. And I say how that'll look because, currently we have our vision section, our land use section, and our implementation section, which is kind of how a standard kind of bare bones master plan works, and that can sometimes work great. But we're talking about adding a chapter now, a housing chapter, to address our housing issues. And our previous 2018 master plan talked about the importance of having a separate chapter on downtown and what that might look like, because there's not a whole lot about downtown in there. And to address that, they said, there's not a whole lot in there about downtown. I'm paraphrasing the master plan at this point, but there should be more, and we should develop a chapter on that. And so we can talk about if we want to have a couple of extra chapters in this master plan. And if so, how do we have the capacity to go about that? And there are different answers to that. We don't have to have an answer tonight. But I would like to start thinking about what our master plan might look like. In my own head, thinking about what needs some attention. Housing, which we already have money and a consultant on board for. Downtown, as our previous master plan outlined, it's not thorough enough, and it's the real heart of our community. And I think they were right in the 2018 master plan. It does deserve its own chapter to really make sure that heart of our community stays as strong and vibrant as possible. And the other one, I've heard a lot about, and partially I don't want to get into all the details of this, but I know some of you know this. I was temporarily working with the university trying to do this cluster project, and
Did it ever go anywhere?
no. I don't even want to get into it. It was not easy, and for lots of different reasons.
John and I were the two that were trying to stay on it.
Yeah, and anyway,
Sorry, what was the cluster project?
it was a economic development cluster project.
Okay.
As envisioned, not by me originally, but by someone else at the university, to focus on downtown.
Okay.
But at some of our discussions, though, we talked about the fact that, even if we don't do it right away, if we focus on downtown first, it might not be a bad idea to have also a chapter on Tenny Mountain Highway.
That's what I was thinking.
That's what I was just gonna,
Yeah.
that whole area, because it's it's very general.
So we did one back 14 years ago.
When you say a master plan-
Specifically, Tenny Mountain Highway. So that plan exists. I believe I have that in a box.
I think Frank has referenced that, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Wasn't he talking about, wasn't there originally proposed a roadway that would cut to the south of Tenny Mountain Highway that might serve some of the southern part
Town
of
West
the
Road.
Yeah.
Town West Road.
Well, yeah, so
So basically, that master plan for Tenny Mountain Highway emphasized that we need to do something with Smithbridge Road, but also the interconnectivity of lots, obviously on the same side of the road.
Right.
We need to do more of that so they're not continually coming back on and going back off. That was the main goal.
Can you describe that again? I didn't understand that. The roads coming on and off?
Interconnectivity, like the place, Tenny Mountain Pizza,
Yeah.
and
Like all these curve cuts off
yeah,
the
you have
highway.
to, you have to have four-wheel drive almost to
Right,
make
yeah,
it.
okay.
And then the town, when Walmart went in, we wanted a connector, which didn't happen for the first couple of years between Walmart and then getting into the Tractor Supply Road up to Midstate. We forced that connection, which
Got it.
initially was hard to get, but we forced it.
So was it basically like a frontage road envisioned, or no? Okay.
Parallel
Yeah.
access from one business.
Okay.
I mean, what's
Plaza to
there is
another.
basically a frontage road now, because if you look at anywhere from the Badger Peabody Smith all the way down to Tenny Mountain Pizza, you can go through the parking lot.
That's true. You can't.
Right.
Yes.
And that
Which does avoid some of that entering the highway,
I'm sure.
getting off. The
I'm sure
highway,
people
right?
use it.
So
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is a chapter for Tenny Mountain Highway would be a good idea.
Yes.
And we have some preliminary legwork to add into that, and we can update it with our own 2025, 26, 27 vision
Yes.
of what that might look like. And it sounds like
Yeah.
might be a good idea.
And I believe I
Absolutely.
have that study too, so
You have it?
I believe I have a copy of that
Okay,
as well.
good.
So I should be able to dig that up.
Great.
So it sounds like this might be a plan then?
I also
Yeah.
like the idea of a chapter of economic growth. I don't know if,
Yeah.
I know Tenny Mountain
I want to focus more on
is
that.
economic growth, but I think if we have a chapter on housing, a chapter on economic growth
Yeah.
as well is
Yeah.
important.
Well,
We sort of, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I thought you were done. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I probably should have been done.
Anyhow, I'm sorry if I did interrupt. I kind of agree. Here's my one caution. I mean, first of all, the good part about that is I believe the select board is actually trying to work on economic development as well. Correct? Yes. Which could feed into this.
Okay.
Where I have a little bit of caution, and I don't think it's a game stopper, it just has an effect on how we frame it, is that as a master plan, it should really kind of tie back into land use and not kind of just broader economic development. But obviously, the two are tied together, which is
much
why you
so.
have like planning and development departments. But it just means if we were to do that, which is not a bad idea, we just have to keep it kind of pulled into land use while we're doing that.
I see that. Yeah. And Neil, what's the select board working on for that you just mentioned?
We were working on, we were considering seeking funding for a road that would go behind Harris Furniture and come up to Boulder Point.
That's actually not what I was thinking of. I thought wasn't there a talk about hiring a consultant to do an economic
right.
development
Right,
plan?
We're in the process of hiring consultant
Good.
to help the planning department.
Oh, okay.
And
So
the engineer,
I think if you look at, you
the
know,
engineer needs more help.
I'm not all that familiar with it, but I know Littleton made a concerted effort to kind of make a commercial park a few years ago, and it's, you know, I think their economy has really benefited from that, and I think we have space and location that could make that work here as well.
So I just want to step back for a moment. We've been talking about master plans.
Yeah.
Some of you probably know more or less about what a master plan can and can't do. So depending on how long you've been on the board, or studied this type of stuff, or whatever. So a master plan, it is a non-binding document. You have a copy there, and it was in our packets as well. And it describes, you know, our vision for the community, and a vision that is meant to look forward, like short, medium, long term, and it's meant to inform our decision-making process. That vision is also based on a kind of assessment of our land use, and so there's, I say typically, but also there actually has to be in our by law a land use chapter. And then also typically includes an implementation section where we talk about how we're actually going to achieve those plans, and what steps to take to achieve, or at least move in the direction of achieving those plans. But the master plan itself does not have any binding power. This is why when we were talking about the hotel, for those of you who remember that discussion, we talked about the fact, well, there are these statements in the master plan, which is true, but they really don't have any binding power until they get turned into the zoning ordinance especially, but also other documents like site plan review regulations and other things it might guide. But in and of itself, the master plan enables us legally to have zoning. But beyond that, it really has no binding power. It's just our vision. And yeah,
I'd like to add something.
go ahead.
The town of Plymouth adopted a town brand, and that brand, which was adopted by the town meeting, is that we are the Center for Environmental Studies and Ecotourism.
Yes,
And
I remember this.
there's a long list of organizations which are, I guess you'd call it, little satellites around Plymouth, such as the National Forest Service and the Science Center and the different activities and the efforts of the Conservation Commission and the Energy Commission. And I think the people of the town wanted to express how much they appreciate the environment in the town. And I think that that should be one of the concerns of a master plan.
Okay. Actually, and I will say actually that they're doing a new NRI at the Conservation Commission. And I know Joan has mentioned the possibility.
We just gave them funding.
I was gonna say, did they get the funding?
Well, that funding's gonna be at town meeting.
And
Oh, okay.
so close. So Joan has mentioned the possibility of maybe that it could even like feed into a chapter or something.
Yeah.
Which we'd have to decide as a board. But it is something to consider, and she has, I know, mentioned the idea. Yeah.
So I was involved 20 some odd years ago with the master plan, and Burnt Rock was the consultant, and they pretty much wrote a lot of what could then just be transferred into the zoning as a zoning amendments. And I was on the outside, so I really appreciate Molly's sister and mom being in the audience and being involved from the outside, because I got involved with early on with my cousins, and there were 4 people, and next thing you know, because of two specific changes to the ag zone, and next thing you know, we filled up the gymnasium because it was too specific. And in getting, I'm very passionate about the town, and I hope the town, I hear from a lot of people, they appreciate what I bring to the planning board, and there is a lot of things that can go back and forth. But it was too specific for a master plan, which is supposed to be just a guide, a general guide, not specifically written. And we did get into that problem with Burnt Rock, spent a lot of money, thousands of dollars, and then got very little for it after, because it all got kind of thrown out. And then got involved with Rhonda Bishop and so many others in the community. They got onto the planning board and actually wrote some more generalized terms that were goals for the community. And it worked out really well. Then I was involved with the next one 10 years later on being on the planning board, and that was very enjoyable.
And I will say, it's not a bad idea to look at what other towns have done for their master plans and kind of get a feel for like how ours relates to that or whatever. And, you know, typically looking at other master plans, there usually is not too much language that can just be kind of cut and paste into a zoning ordinance. It's more about goals and maybe some guidance of how to achieve them. There are communities who, if they have specific like development plans for like developing a park or something like that, might be a bit more specific. But in terms of like language to directly insert into a zoning ordinance,
Which is what it was.
yeah, it tends. You don't see that very often. It does exist, but it's not necessarily the norm. Yeah.
So you're saying that there was language developed that was
Yeah, it
like a
had-
zoning ordinance, but it was in the master plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was, dimensions, it was
Oh, I see.
writing the whole thing, and whole parts, I think, is what they envision dropping it into the zoning ordinance.
I see.
Did the planning
Whole sections.
Did the planning board ask for that?
They were trying to do the best they can, again, all volunteers,
Yeah.
and soon realized, yeah, they went about it the wrong way. And because there were different views it kind of like the pressure made a really nice diamond, and the town got something very good out of it.
Good metaphor.
That's a good bit for you.
That's what it takes. It's a lot of give and take.
Yeah.
Is there any room, or do we need to have a wider town discussion about visioning Tenny Mountain more specifically?
Well, this is anything we do for a master plan chapter or a whole master plan or whatever. If you're doing it right for a master plan, there's
Yeah.
a lot of extensive engagement.
Yeah,
Because this way you can actually refer back to that document, as we've done in this board,
right.
and say, we didn't just kind of make this up on the board.
Right.
That this is from the town that the board with the consultant, whoever else, has translated into this document.
I'm just thinking about how, all the work with the potential PUD amendment that we did not go through, I think actually created a lot of really important visioning and imagining of what could be there that I'm not sure is in the master plan right now.
Page 38.
Is it?
Potential
Okay.
new development area.
All right, I want to read it.
I mean, one of the interesting things reading this master plan, if you read
Is it?
closely enough,
Page 38.
Well, so I mean, like more specifically than I see that. I see
But
the
you don't
area.
want it like you talk. You don't want to get into specifics.
Yeah.
Well,
what's the
I
line?
think even in the implementation chapter, there was something, I think, further down, like, but yeah.
I was going to say one of the interesting things
We read it at the last meeting.
you'll find in the in there if you read closely enough, which I think speaks to the fact that it really is the town's opinions being like collated and put into a vision based upon a lot of input, is there are contradictions in there. It wasn't just one author writing this and saying this is what we want. There are
definitely-
places where you read here and then you read over here and you're like, well, this place says we want like multimodal transportation and bicycles and all this other stuff, and this like section over here says no, we just want cars. And
Like our zoning ordinance.
I guess my point is Tiny Mountain a question that deserves an entire chapter, or is it okay to keep it folded into, like it's up, I think right now it's kind of under economic development policies.
I mean, I mentioned it because I've heard from other people that they'd like to see a lot of concerted effort devoted to Tenny Mountain because they see it just, there's a lot of really good economic activity out there. And at the same time, there's a lot of people who look at it and are scared that it looks a bit too much like Tilton or something like that.
Tenny Mountain Highway or Tenny Mountain?
Tenny Mountain Highway.
Ski
Tenny Mountain
area?
Highway.
I'm talking about the ski area.
Oh, you're talking about the ski area? Okay,
Yeah.
never mind.
Yes.
We really got to like figure out a better way to deliver.
Yeah, I know,
these
it
two.
could be frustrating, yeah.
It
The
is
ski area,
confusing.
I mean, personally, I'd love to see the PUD, of course, and let's say you come up with the master
Yeah.
plan. But obviously that didn't happen this year.
I mean, it does say on page 44, thank you, Phil. Number 7, encourage four-season recreational development at Tenny Mountain, revises land use regulations. So, I don't know. I brought it up just because it was in my mind.
Okay. No, it's a good question.
It is vague in there.
Yeah, okay.
So where you want to
But
go
it's
with
meant
that.
to be vague.
Yeah.
I mean,
I,
it's high level.
I understand
Like,
that. That's the double
It's
edge.
supposed to be our guidance, and we're supposed to consolidate it and make something more specific that can be a zoning amendment.
Exactly.
And there is a balance between, like, there's too vague,
Right.
but it's definitely too specific.
Okay.
40,000 foot view.
Yeah.
And we do have well, of course, this is tentative, but historically, the CIP committee and select board have been quite supportive of having some funds in the capital improvements program for master plan work. So, consultants are pricey for this kind of work. I mean, as we saw with, Barrett, I think we got a good value with them, but there is a cost to that kind of work, and bringing in a firm that would be able to help with the capacity needs of writing something so large and having the amount of public engagement necessary is something that going forward will just be something to consider. There is some funding in the CIP for it. Obviously, that is contingent upon that continuing to be there, but so that could be an opportunity, and obviously Barrett Planning knows the town. Lakes Region Planning Commission has expressed that they are trying to get back into the business of doing master plans, but there are a whole host of consultants that could be considered for
And they have
something like this.
really stepped up their capacity recently.
They have
But still, like, is it enough to get what we want is a real open question. And I will say, I mean, if we look at our master plan here and think about like adding a housing chapter, economic development, and the other
Yeah,
area
housing
master plans,
chapter's too big.
we're not Manchester.
Yeah.
And although Manchester's master plan is gorgeous, if you ever want to take a look at it, it's actually a good read. Like, the thing about master plan being a good read is not very common.
Yeah.
It actually, I assigned it to my students at some point.
Wow.
So I like read these like few master plans. The only one they all actually like read cover to cover was the longest one. It was Manchester's, but it was actually engaging. It was like interesting to look at. But anyway, we're not Manchester, right? We're not going to have like that big of a master plan.
Right.
And some of this may require, if we do want to have these kind of breakout sections or chapters, maybe a bit of kind of tightening as well in other places to really kind of have a focused master plan. And this is a big discussion, like I think, Joseph, you've probably heard as well, like towns are talking about, do we want to have a shorter master plan? That it doesn't have to have like dozens and dozens of pages of data that like
Right.
That no one wants to really read.
And so this is an ongoing discussion right now, if like maybe master plans should be more focused. So maybe you add more chapters, but maybe you also kind of just like trim off the fat a bit while you're doing that.
Yeah,
Agreed.
tricky.
We ought to consider an industrial park.
I agree.
We had a feasibility study done. It was 1984, so it obviously, most of the lands contemplated by it
Starting
are
point.
otherwise
Sure
used.
is.
But it is on, if you go to the Planning and Development Department webpage, we've digitized and uploaded a lot of historic plans and studies that the planning board and town have had done. So that is basically from the HOP project of 2023 back through the 1984 industrial park study. We have kind of a range of the planning board, planning department, select board planning studies. So that can be an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, that's just an interesting note. And also, if you're interested, it is available to read that study.
Isn't it exciting as the Manchester master
Yeah,
plan?
is
Because I'm
it?
not reading
No,
it. It's not as exciting as the Manchester master plan.
It is not nearly as aesthetically pleasing, I will say.
Okay.
It's 1984 aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Interesting to look at, yeah.
So, I mean, I think our goal right now should be to launch the HOP 2.0
Yes.
and the housing master plan. But I think we definitely want to keep on the pretty active back burner conversations about a larger master plan and how this is all going to fit together in the next few years. Because if we don't start it soon, it's gonna creep up on us and
Yep.
And I mean, there are towns out there who haven't updated their master plan in like 25 years. But I'm not sure that's really
Not
the
going to
best.
be one of those.
We don't want to be one of those, exactly. All right. Any other thoughts about master planning? Okay. So, I'll talk really slowly so I can drag it out to 10 o'clock. No. Information strategies for our zoning amendments for town meeting.
Right.
We've talked already about having an informational session at our March business meeting, so a month from now. So just a couple of weeks away from town meeting, then I think that would be a really good idea. And so basically we're up here, as we always are anyway, right? And maybe we give a short introduction to each zoning amendment, and this really does open the floor for questions. Not about, saying you should or shouldn't vote this way. I mean, we've endorsed the amendments, but whatever. But more about like, what does this language mean? And we can be here to clarify that.
Can I ask,
What it means, that's all.
Yeah.
you said the business meeting, did you mean the work meeting?
I meant a work meeting, yes,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Yes,
'Cause-
sorry.
So that would be the 6th of March.
That's what I meant to say, yeah.
Okay, just checking.
That's pretty close to town.
It's very close, yeah.
When
It
is
is.
voting?
It's the 12th, I believe, of March. Town meeting's the 11th, or is it reverse of that? Wow, I can really hear
Yeah,
myself.
if
one
the
is the
11th is
12th.
the vote in the ballot vote, and the 12th is
Is the meeting.
Town meeting.
So it's really, it's the week before.
Which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's still fresh on people.
That's
that
true.
way,
Yeah.
the information session is close enough where it's still fresh on people's mind.
And unless you want to have a totally separate extra meeting,
Town meeting.
it's really our only chance.
Busy that day.
The day we're having that extra meeting. I'm busy too.
The
So,
6th.
the 6th it is then. And I would, so, it would be- what am I trying to say here? So, first half of the meeting, Plymouth zoning amendments, kind of open meeting, informational session. And second half of that meeting, hopefully we'll have something about our planning by then, and we can start talking about HOP 2.0. And if we want, I think it might not be a bad idea if we already have people here who are interested in zoning amendments to do a kind of little soft launch, nothing big or anything, just to tell the community, like say, hey, there are 2 points of our meeting tonight. One is to say, ask us questions about the zoning amendments. And 2 is to let you all know that we're launching this process we're at the very ground level stages, but at least make some kind of public statement that like, this is starting to happen.
Certainly.
Nothing big and elaborate, no fireworks, you know.
Nope,
March 6th.
doesn't hurt.
Yep.
Makes sense.
That works well.
So another question then is, I know you've already like said no, which is, do we want to do any videos or anything this time around?
I would like to give other people the opportunity.
So you're saying no without saying no?
Are those films are still available?
They should be.
They're on YouTube.
Yeah.
Forever.
Forever.
I got my long hair.
They're also on the archive top project page.
Okay.
Go there on the
The
town
one of the
website.
videos sweating bullets in one of them.
They're
Explain last year's zoning amendments. So they're informational videos by me and Matt. We were a pretty good team,
I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys did a great job.
especially the second time.
Yes.
how
First time was
many
a little
how
rough.
many videos did you make?
Each amendment was its own video, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's it on? Was it on just YouTube itself?
Well, PBTV, which has a YouTube channel, as well as their airing, streaming, whatever. Yeah.
I'm sure if you go to Penny Baker TV on YouTube, and
You'll find
type
it.
in zoning amendments.
I'm totally looking at that.
pop up.
Matt yet?
Matt.
2024.
Matt and Joe.
I'll just look into that. I'm a big
But
follower.
I don't know how it worked for the public, if it worked well, but if someone else wants to step into that, I'm certainly no issue with that.
Anybody?
Deja vu.
Was there any feedback from the public?
I don't recall.
Okay.
We asked maybe your TV how many views it has.
Yeah, how many views? Yeah.
Stats, I guess.
Jonathan?
Dan would know better about public feedback because he was the department head at the time and he spearheaded the whole thing.
Okay.
Do we track views on the YouTube channel, on the videos that are on
There
YouTube?
are, actually.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure
let
that
me-
happens automatically.
At least one, maybe.
I watched it when I got home.
Maybe.
I watched it, so there's two.
We did it. Let's over under 50 views. Let's. Who's taking that?
I optimistically over, but
Are you finding them right now?
I was
I think
yeah,
John
just
is.
taking a look. Oh, I suspect maybe a few people are.
Here's
are
one of
looking
them,
at once.
and it has 31 views.
Wow.
Months ago.
Okay.
Wow,
Get
what a
this,
beard.
Joe. I think
Matt's beard was
Joseph.
longer.
I think we need this on the big screen.
Yeah, it's actually a playlist. So
awesome.
you have to go to the playlist. Well, you don't have to,
Thank
but
you
the
guys for
easiest
doing
way
that.
is the
Yes,
playlist.
I really
section.
appreciate that, yeah.
and I can do it again if no one else wants to. I'd be more than happy to step in with you and do them again.
I'll do it with you, Matt.
You guys can do it.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, if you want to, I'm happy
Does
to.
anyone else want to?
I'm good.
Molly, I think you'd be great.
I'll join you, Molly. I'm
Two?
not good at
Oh, good.
planning
All right, there we
stuff.
go.
Two alternates.
Yeah, no, you guys would be
There
great.
you go. You two would be good.
You've both been here through all the discussions. I feel very confident that you'd both be good,
Joseph,
good
do you want
effective
to?
communicators around that.
So I will say, when Matt and I did it, the first time we kind of just like wung it, and it was a little. I think we were both just really busy. I think, and it was a little rougher. The second time I wrote a script,
Yes.
and it took a whole lot less time to make because we didn't constantly fumble over ourselves. And it sounded a little bit more wooden, perhaps, reading a script, but like it was a whole lot easier.
It
Yeah.
was easier to understand, I think. A
Yeah.
script,
Yeah.
don't wear green
Scripts are, yeah.
for the green screen.
And don't wear a screen.
And although looking at us, we're both wearing green.
Yeah, you could use the screen.
Joseph, if they did write something, would you be willing to look at it and just kind of say, yeah, that
Happy
kind of
to.
works?
Yep, I'm happy to. If you guys have any interest in discussing script or finer points of the details of the amendments and how to scriptify those, I'm happy to do what I can.
You don't want, okay, sure.
I am not a scriptwriter.
And we read the amendments verbatim.
Okay.
What helped on our second time doing our scripts was our intros and our outros.
Okay.
Really.
You
I'll,
can look-
I'll watch you.
can
I'll
watch
watch them. Yeah, I'll watch them.
Watch the first one.
I watch them.
But because when we did get to the actual amendment, it was zero interpretation. It was
Yeah, of course.
Just reading.
Yeah,
it,
yeah. That makes sense. Okay.
well, great, excellent.
All right. You're
So
off the
excited that
hook.
he
You're off the
does not have
hook.
to do it.
Nor do I.
That's right.
You are off the hook.
All right.
Wow, I'm just signing up for everything.
And then Jonathan will be the primary point of contact as the PBTV manager as well.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan.
We'll have to coordinate with with the PBTV schedule and everything like that. Make sure that you know, we
So,
can find availability for the studio.
so when do we want these to be done?
So they just got approved in today's meeting, correct? Selectmen's meeting?
Yes, they just passed it all. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're ready to go now.
And so I would say certainly by the end of the month.
Okay.
And in some ways, it's nice to have them land not last minute, but not like too early
Too
either.
early?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not here the last week of February, so we'll have to do it around that.
Next week.
Last week of February.
No, I mean, so we're gonna have to do them next week. And okay.
As long as Mr. Picard's schedule works out well.
What was that?
As long as
Oh.
Schedule works.
Jonathan's schedule works.
Okay.
And if he plans on doing any post-editing.
We could have some musical introductions as well.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking out at the public.
No?
I'm fine with musical introductions. Okay.
The duets.
I'm sure PBTV
When I was a
has
kid,
some royalty
there was
free
a guy
music.
that had a
Sure.
car,
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
megaphone on the roof, drive all around
Blues
town.
Brothers style.
Yeah.
That's how people found out what was going on in
You're
town.
kidding. Oh, that's
Yeah, a
awesome.
big loudspeaker on a car, you know, just drive around all around the streets.
Oh, like the Blues Brothers.
One night only.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. I am incredibly appreciative,
You're welcome.
as is Matt.
Likewise, I can't wait to see the final product.
All right. Is there any unfinished or other business from members of the planning board or staff? Yes.
So to be very cognizant of the chair's recommendation that we do not talk about what I mentioned earlier that Joseph prepared, he does have a few paragraphs, maybe a page or two, of something potential that I think it would be advantageous for the planning board to look at. I understand you don't want to do it today or before voting in March 11th, but I think it would be advantageous for the board to look at it because it is examples of how other communities have handled, rather than making uses into special exceptions, to go by scale, size, and scope. So I'm hoping the board can look at that possibly in April then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay.
And Joseph's got it all written out and share it for hopefully April.
All right. Anybody else? Are there any public comments? And that includes all of you who may or may not be out there, I'm not even sure, on Zoom.
Someone did pop in earlier, I thought.
Yeah. There's
We did have.
Yeah, somebody was commenting they couldn't hear us, right?
Yep.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
microphone.
You got to go stand up.
Microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dizzy standing up too fast. I love the idea of updating the master plan because I sense I've only been here 40 years, so I know I don't have much perspective, but the town of Plymouth has changed dramatically, even since the master plan we have now was created. And I mean, COVID did so much to bring all different people to this town. And I think we really have to figure out how to engage the community a whole lot more. Molly and I have had long conversations about how do you get information into people's ears and eyes and heads, and it's not easy. You know, social media is what everybody uses, but that's not easy for a municipality to deal with. Newspaper is really good. I think we could do a lot more with our local rag than we're doing now. But word of mouth and just knowing neighborhoods. We have so many different neighborhoods now. I mean, behind us when we first moved there was nobody. And now there's about, I don't know, 25 or 30 houses up there.
On Frontenac.
Frontenac, yeah.
Oh, Chattering Lane.
Chattering Lane.
Chattering Lane. So we've got to get to these people because so many of them are from out of state. moved to New Hampshire. They've got no clue about how we do business here. And they're just not involved, so some way we got to think about, be creative about that. That's my only comment.
Thank you. That's a very
Thanks.
important point.
I hear that we might need public people on the master plan committee, so, just saying. Did you say public health? Public people, public on the master plan committee.
Public people.
I've only been here for 10 years.
All right.
So can I throw one other thing out?
No.
Mike, I'm
As a
being
member of
sen-
the public?
being sensitive to your concerns. I'm wondering if it would also make sense to look at our definition of home occupation and maybe loosen those restrictions a little, and that might help
Yeah.
encourage some of the types of business, allow some of the types of businesses I think I've heard concern about. I think we have.
In April.
We currently allow home occupations, and I think that could be broadened if but it also, so that's something we can also consider for next year.
I will also add, I think there was several of us here who described this process, I think rightly, as an iterative
Sure.
process.
Oh, yeah.
That whatever changes we make are not the final changes. It's a process of moving in a direction.
Yeah.
And fine tuning and honing, and it's a step.
Yep.
And not a step towards something more drastic or something, perhaps towards more nuance. And I think most of us in this conversation would welcome more nuance over time. No?
No, I'm just trying to wrap my head around nuanced.
Specific and I don't know, how more do you?
Well, I mean, we made some changes that I think address.
Proposed.
We
We
proposed
proposed some
changes, thank you. We proposed changes that I think answered, as we tried, the public's concerns about potential development in the ag zone. And I think through that whole process, we talked about the fact that this is probably a good, straightforward starting point. And that over time, where we saw more room for fine tuning and perhaps new definitions and more, really changes that are more nuanced and more complex and require more time, perhaps a little bit each year, we could start to change definitions and maybe add some of the scale-based definitions and stuff like that. And I think that's what I mean by nuance.
Language that accounts for scale, the way we've talked about it before, for example.
And we'll see. Who knows what that will be?
Yeah, what that actually
And
says.
we don't have a silver ball, crystal ball at this point.
Silver bullet,
but-
crystal ball.
But we'll see. But yeah, I think we all, had welcomed more conversation. It's a question of timing and other stuff, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? We can keep going.
No, it's
Or
not.
I almost heard a motion a moment
Yeah,
ago.
I was going to say motion to adjourn.
Are you saying?
Get a second?
You have a second on that.
All right. All in favor?
I
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. We are adjourned.